A lot of people who play RuneScape generally want to get into killing bosses. There's something that is really satisfying about killing something that's level like 600 or something, and then having the potential of getting drops that are 25, 30, 50 mil. But for a lot of newer players, there seems to be this sort of like knowledge hump that you need to get over before you can get into bossing. It's usually not just skills related, though your combat level does depict this. It has to do a lot with some general knowledge of the game as well, the inner mechanics of how the game works and how you can manipulate some of those things. So in this video, I'll be going over some things you should know how to do well before you start getting into some higher level bossing. This video I'll also be including some bosses that you can go and practice these on, so that way you can get better at them before you get into more high pressure situations. Shameless plug real quick, follow me on Twitter. I'm trying to be more active on there. I do video updates, streaming updates if I ever stream, and a lot of pictures of cats. Like a lot of pictures of cats. I love my cats. I have plenty of pictures of them. So if you want pictures of cats, adorable cats, then follow me on Twitter. Okay, let's get into the video. Okay, keep in mind that this video is designed around people who have little to no PvM experience and want to start getting into it. If the concepts I'm describing seem too basic for you, then consider taking a more advanced approach to them. I will have advanced concepts at the end of each talking point, so make sure you stick around to the end or just go to the timestamp in the description. Side note, there's always timestamps in the description. You don't ever need to ask me about them. Starting off at the most basic thing that you need to have a firm understanding of is when to eat and drink. Or a better way of describing this would be understand how to properly manage your food and your prayer. This is the most basic concept to understand when you're starting off bossing, and is easily the most simple thing to mess up. So we had this saying when I did progression raiding back in WoW, when I did like heroic and mythic raiding, and I played a DPS or I played a mage, and in the DPS chats we always had this saying of, if you're dead, you can't DPS. Basically, this comes down to you need to prioritize being alive more than anything else. It doesn't matter if you push more damage, but then you just died because you weren't paying attention to something. You didn't get the kill. It didn't matter. You're dead. You have to make sure that you're alive above everything else. So in RuneScape, this translates to 1, making sure you have enough HP, and 2, making sure you have prayer. Because sometimes being alive doesn't only consist of your HP. Actually, well, primarily it consists of your HP, but against some bosses, if your protection prayer ever drops or hits 0 and you let that fall off, then that boss can sometimes hit you like 10,000 or something and just one-shot you. So it's important to be able to manage both of these and understand how to manage both of them correctly. Something else to add on to the basic concept of just managing your health and your prayer is understanding when you need to eat. Just because your health is a little bit lower than full or like half full or whatever, it doesn't mean that you have to eat in all circumstances. Each boss will have a different way or a different time when you need to eat. And to help example this point as to what I'm talking about, I'm going to use Barrows. Barrows is like a very introductory boss. It's very simple and it's very easy to kill. But it does help teach you the most basic concept of PvM, which is staying alive, as well as help teach you the continuation of this point of teaching you how to maximize your DPS. Okay, bro, I need to stop you right there. You said DPS like 5 or 6 times in this video already, and I've got like no idea what that means. Dude, what is DPS, please? Yeah, that's a fair point. So DPS stands for damage per second, which is basically how much damage you're able to output during any encounter. You basically take however much damage you dealt and then divide it by the number of seconds in that fight, and there's your damage per second. The higher this number is, obviously the faster the boss dies, which also means the more kills you get, which also means the more chances you get at hitting a good roll on the loot table. So DPS is a very important thing to try to maximize, and there's a couple things that you can do to try to maximize this, and they generally revolve around knowing when to eat and when you have to eat. Okay, definitions aside, let's discuss how to actually know when to eat. Use Barrows to illustrate this point. People generally pray against Darok and Carol, and sometimes they pray against Aram as well, so I'm not going to use Aram in this example. I'm going to instead just use Varrock the Defiled. The first thing that I need to know before I go into the encounter is, what's his max hit? Max hit is 23, which is very easy to find just on the wiki. Just type in whatever boss or whatever monster you're going to go fight, and then look for whatever their max hit is. Important to note that if you're praying, he can hit a 15, but whatever. It's important to know this, as you need to know exactly where his KO potential lies. Basically, how is this boss able to kill you? If the boss is able to combo hit you or something like that, like Zora, for example, can combo you with the snakelings, you need to know what that combo potential is. You need to know how the boss is actually going to kill you. It's also important to know exactly how much healing potential you have as well. So, for example, let's say you have sharks and you're killing Varrock. So we know that Varrock can hit us for 23, and we know we can heal for 20 before he hits us again. So now let's say you're sitting at 43 HP when you're fighting Varrock. He hits you for a 19 and takes you down to 24 HP. Should you eat? While your health does look low here, it's not recommended to eat because even if Varrock maxes you and hits a 23, you still won't die, and he take you down to 1 HP, and you can heal up to a 21. And then, based on the way damage calculations work, there's a lot more that goes into damage calculations, but for the purposes and simplicity of this video, let's just say that he has a chance to hit you, and if he hits you, he has a 1 in each damage roll. It's like a 1 in 24 chance because his max hit is a 23. So the hits that will kill you will be a 21, a 22, and a 23. So 3 out of the 24 potential rolls he can have can kill you. So 3 out of 24, which reduces down to 1 in 8. He has a 1 in 8 chance of killing you after already maxing on you, which is also very high. So it's okay to fall down to 1 here and then eat up to 21 because the chances of him actually killing you are 1 in 8, which isn't that bad. When you eat up though, you are at 21 HP, so you should still eat up to get above 41, which is above that 23 max hit, which we already know Varrock can max at. If he hits you again before you're able to eat again, all you want to do is just make sure that your health is above the max hit. The concept here can be basically summed up into: you need to know exactly how much the monster can do to you while knowing exactly how much you can heal for and trying to stay above whatever they can max hit you for. You don't ever want to sit within their max hit range because, well, you can die. It's okay to fall to it, but you don't want to sit in it is what I'm trying to get at. This is why you'll see people generally sitting around kind of low HP levels, because eating in the middle of a fight lowers your DPS because it slows down how fast you can actually recuperate to attack. You want to be able to make sure that you're only eating when you absolutely have to, so you're able to maximize your DPS in a fight, which I'll go into how you actually recover your health later. This whole discussion that we've had about knowing when to eat though does not apply to drinking potions, because drinking potions doesn't necessarily interrupt your DPS. If you drink directly after attacking, then click to attack again. It should not interrupt your DPS unless you're using a 2-tick weapon such as darts or a blowpipe, which it's also to be noted that it shouldn't interrupt your DPS using these either. You just have to be very quick with your clicks to make sure that you don't miss the 2 ticks here. Managing prayer is much simpler than managing health due to it not hindering your DPS. So just monitor your prayer and drink when you get a full benefit of a prayer dose. However, with prayer, it is most important to understand how to prayer flick. This is because if you simply leave your prayer on, like Protect from Melee for example, it's only effective on the tick where you actually get hit from the monster. The ticks in between the attacks, you are essentially wasting prayer you could use later on in the fight, or having to waste prayer potions, which is money, when there's no need to use it in the first place. The basic way of prayer flicking is to know the intervals in which the boss attacks, and then just before the tick where they attack, you turn on the prayer or you turn on the overhead prayer, you flick it on, and then you flick it off right after they attack, so that way your protection prayer is on for when the damage goes through, so that way you don't take any damage from this. You basically repeat this for the duration of the fight, and that's the very basic concept of prayer flicking. This is also known by some people as lazy flicking. There is also a more advanced version of this called 1-tick prayer flicking, which when done correctly will effectively use little to no prayer, meaning you can almost always have prayer without ever having to really drink a prayer potion. The method involves flicking the prayer on and off within the same game tick and repeating this for every game tick. The best way to do this is to pull up like an online metronome or use the RuneLite plugin metronome and set it to 100 BPM. Then in between the beats, flick the prayer twice. That's basic concept of how the mechanics of it works. I'm not going to go super into detail with it here. I do in the background have an example of Zulu doing it. Zulu has a guide on how to 1-tick prayer flick, which I'll have linked down in the description. It's how I learned how to 1-tick prayer flick, and it gives a very good overview of how to do it, and he has a very good understanding of how to actually replicate it. So if you are interested in learning how to do this properly, go ahead and give that video a watch. There's a few others out there, but this is just the one that I used, and it taught me how to do it very well. So I'll now show you guys a quick walkthrough of what I'm talking about, and I'll be using my alt to give a more close representation, so I'm not using an account that's just completely max melee and out levels the content of, you know, whatever I'm dealing with. I'll be using Barrows with this, so before we get into this, I have some better gear on my account that I could have used, and here's a picture of what I was going to use, but upon further conversation with some of the people on my CC and a couple of my mods, we decided that, you know, maybe using this gear wasn't the best idea. So enjoy. All right, what's up, y'all? Meet my alt. You can check out the gear here in a second. It is pretty garbage, minus the prims. It looks like I bought my mom's credit card, but whatever. All right, so let's get into this run. All right, so starting off this run, what you're gonna see is you heard that I mentioned something about 1-tick prayer flicking. So what you're gonna see me do is, well, actually, I'm gonna start off by not even having the proper, you know, magic attack acquired, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically flick Darok in order to... Your prayer gets drained regardless in Barrows, but if you can preserve it so that you don't have to actually use any of your prayer, then your prayer is going to go a lot farther. So you'll see that I attempt to start one-tick prayer flicking Darok here, and I kind of mess it up. I haven't been doing this in a little while, so I'm a little rusty at it. And I think for the rest of the fight, I think I mess this up one more time, then for the rest of the fight, I just kind of do some lazy flicking to maximize how much benefit I get off of my prayer. But then after this, we will move on to carols, and I just wanted to slow down this clip so you can kind of see what I mean by prayer flicking. This is a very basic concept, but it's how you preserve your prayer so you're not having it on for all these ticks where he's not attacking. Darok is a great example for this because the interval between his attacks are so long. If I left protect from melee on, I'd be wasting so much prayer because it's literally one tick where damage is dealt. I just need to have my prayer on for that moment and then turn it off, and then I can just save prayer that way. That way I'm not draining my own prayer while I'm being drained by Barrows. Alright, so I'm going to speed up these next couple of kills because there's not a whole lot that's really going on here. I'm just going to go to Carol. I'm going to do the same thing that you saw me do with Darok, but something else I should mention with one-tick prayer flicking is that you can set your quick prayers to be like your buff spells as well. So that way you can actually prayer flick those as well and get the benefits from them. I'm going to go up to Aram, do the same thing here, just range him down and kill him. And then we're going to move on to Varrock as well. And nothing really interesting happens here. I'm just going to keep one-tick prayer flicking as much as I can because I started to get a little bit more comfortable with it. So I'm going to one-tick prayer flick through this fight just because I have the prayer left. If you saw my inventory, I didn't bring any prayer potions because, well, one, my defense level is high enough. It's like 70 something. It's like 76. So my defense level is high enough to tank most of these guys. So I didn't really want to waste the inventory spot. But now we're going to run over to Torag and we're going to just kill Torag. If you saw when I was running over to the Torag mound, I actually ate up to full while I was running, and that's something about managing your health is that I don't want to eat up during the fight. What I want to do instead is eat up when I have downtime anyway, which I'll go into in a second, a little bit more detail. But basically, I will eat here while I'm running to Guthan, so that way it gives me a higher chance of never having to actually eat during the fight because I already have full health here. Now we're just going to kill Guthan here. Pretty straightforward. Very simple. Slayer Dart is actually a terrible spell, but I have 61 magic on this account, so it's pretty bad already. So we're going to kill Guthan here, and then we're going to go ahead and get our kill count, get our loot, and we're going to get out of here. And that's just a pretty standard Barrows run. I want to do it in an account that didn't necessarily have, like, you know, the best gear. Has pretty good stats, but I can't really fight that. It's not my main stats, but I want to do it in gear that's a little bit, not max, because I have, like, full bandos that I could have used. So I just decided to use, like, you know, tribute to Swampletics, I guess. And then get this last kill, then we'll run to the chest, grab the stuff, get in there, grab the chest, and we outie. So a little bit more detail on what you saw there. If you notice that I waited until the end of the fight to eat to full when I was done fighting each of the brothers. And this is because it's downtime that I have during the fights anyway. I can't put out any DPS while I'm running in between the different hills. So instead of hurting my DPS during the fight to eat to full during the fight, what I can do is basically stay as close to the monster's max hit as possible, and then in between the kills I can eat up to full so I give myself the best chance of having to eat as little as possible during the fight. This is important to keep in mind when killing a boss that has multiple phases or breaks in between combat. You can look at something like Zora or Vorketh, for example. You try to do all of your eating and potting during these downtimes since it's time you can't be outputting DPS anyway. This will help maximize your DPS during the actual damage phases because you're not having to stop and make sure you don't die. Again, it all revolves around maximizing DPS. If you do have to eat during a fight, like you're below the monster's max hit, try to combo it with something else. Most things in this game can be comboed with food, most notably potions. So if you ever have to eat during a fight, try to get a drink of a potion at the same time that you would normally have to drink anyway, so you can do that in one motion and not have to switch and click back to your inventory anyway. This will not increase your downtime from the food because there is no delay when drinking potions, putting on gear, moving locations, etc. So try to maximize your downtime when eating by trying to get at least 2 actions into the same motion. Something else I want to touch on this subject. There are some bosses in this game that are much larger than just a 1x1 square, like Barrows, for example. Those are 1x1 monsters. They're the same size in terms of the tiles as a normal player. There are most bosses that are larger than that, usually 2x2 or 3x3. And so something to understand when you're doing these bosses, and this is more notably when you're soloing or tanking, but if you ever have to eat for whatever reason, you have to stop DPSing for whatever reason, and you're tanking the damage, you can actually walk underneath the boss, and this will force the boss to, like, kind of dance with you, and it's what it's called dancing the boss or walking the boss. But basically what it allows you to do is to be able to get underneath the boss, eat the food that you need to without the boss getting in free damage, because, well, the boss can't see you, the boss can't actually attack you. You'll more notably see this with either Calfight Queen, Krill, Sesseroth, or the Zambi boss, or General Gridor, which is the Bandos boss. You'll see it generally with these three bosses because they are large monsters in themselves. They're like 3x3 or 2x2 at least. And so when people solo these, if they ever have to eat, if they're not like one tick prayer flicking everything, they will generally walk underneath the boss to eat. Or if you're using a slower weapon than the attack cycle of the boss, more notably when you're using like a God Sword or something, because you want that crush weapon or you want that very high strength bonus, what you'll see is that in between attacks, or like every 2 attacks, you'll see somebody walking underneath it. And again, this is based around preserving your life total instead of trying to maximize DPS here. You're preserving your life total because if you were to just stand out there and attack at every attack interval with a God Sword, like on Gridor or Krill or KQ, they're going to be attacking faster than you. So by the time you get that second attack off or that third attack off, you may have already tanked 4 attacks from them or 3 attacks from them. Like, you may have already taken more attacks from the boss than you can actually put out. So walking underneath the boss basically allows us to be on that same playing field when using a slower weapon. So if you're using something slow, like a God Sword, like well, God Sword is the more notable one, but if you're using like a spear or a two-handed weapon, generally is slower than most one-handers, then what you want to do is make sure you walk underneath the boss to make sure you're on a 1-to-1 ratio of your attacks to their attacks. You don't want to take useless damage. That's going to make for a bad time. That's going to make for you to like not be able to kill the boss as much. So we've covered 2 bosses so far, but they've both kind of covered the same umbrella concept of prayer and food management. One was talking about how to know when to eat, and the other one was focused more on how to preserve your eating, or how to preserve your health in general. But this topic, we're going to move on to learning how to gear switch. Some bosses you will have to do some sort of gear switch in the middle of the fight, and the faster you do this, the faster you can get back to doing damage. The reason for a gear switch will generally be determined by some phase changing in the box that makes them immune to some portion of that combat triangle, and you will have to be able to switch in order to a different combat style in order to continue outputting DPS. 2 good bosses / monsters that illustrate this are the DKs and the demonic gorillas. Now, soloing DKs might seem a bit daunting if you're a lower level, and because of this, you might want to hit up some friends and knock it out together. Or you can join my CC and ask. Generally, we have a lot of people that like to PVM, and we have a lot of people who generally like to teach people how to PVM. The only requirement is that you listen and you go along with what they're saying, but our CC is generally very nice if you're trying to find people how to PVM, learn how to PVM in general. So DKs, again, if you're a lower level, it may seem a little bit daunting. Go and do it a couple times before you actually attempt to solo it, but for the purpose of this video, we'll be using DKs as an example of switching. Now, when it comes to PVM, you do not have to do the kinds of switches that you see PvPers do a lot of the time. In fact, you can actually just hit a 4-way switch, and that's generally good enough for most situations, even up to things like Theater of Blood in some instances. Of course, the better you are at these switches, the more gear you can switch, which means the more damage you can output, so it's obviously something that you can improve upon that will have positive results for improving upon. My cap is generally a 4-way switch at Zulrah, and it has generally done absolutely fine for me in the past, so don't feel bad if you can only do 2 to start off. You have to start somewhere, and you have to give yourself a reason to improve. So how does switching work? Well, I'm not going to go too in-depth here, as it's very simple, but switching comes down to how many pieces of gear you can equip in one game tick, which is 0.6 seconds, or if you have a metronome at 100 BPM, the time in between one beat and another is 0.6 seconds. So to help teach yourself how fast a game tick is, try putting an online metronome or the RuneLite plugin and set it to 100 BPM. Then in between the one beat and the next, see how many pieces of gear you can put on. This is obviously not a good representation of how you will do under pressure, but it will give you a good idea of what it feels like to do a switch in one tick. The only way to get better at these switches is to practice them in high pressure situations like bossing and then forcing it to become muscle memory. So using a metronome in a controlled environment to get used to the feel and then start implementing it into your boss kills is a great start. You can also do this while doing things like PVM, doing things like Slayer, when you have to switch on your Guthans. Try doing it in one tick. Again, not super high pressure situation, but it'll give you the feel of what it feels like to do a 4-way switch in one tick. Now, I'm going to show you guys a basic run through of me doing a DK trip and showing gear switching. Keep in mind that I can't always hit 4-way one-tick switches all the time. I don't plan to. I don't really PVM enough to really justify it. But this is to show you there's always room to improve. This is a great place to actually start practicing it. Again, if you're in low level and you can't do DKs yet, try to find someone to go with you and try to do it duo. It's a very easy boss to duo. It's actually not that bad to solo it once you know what to do. But This will give you a good idea as to what I mean by switching and learning how to do it faster, because you'll see the longer it takes for me to switch, the longer it takes for me to actually start DPSing the next king, the longer it takes for me to, well, get that one dead, and if I kill it too slow, then the next one will spawn and I'll start taking damage from another one. So there's pressure here. Not so much that I risk dying all that much, but there's definitely pressure here. So for some commentary on this clip, this trip took a very long time. I'm not going to show you guys everything, but what you're going to see here is Rex is going to get pretty low. I'm not going to kill him on this one, but on the next one, I'm going to kill him, make my way over to Prime, and then switch as fast as possible while I'm moving to Prime. I generally want to be moving as I'm switching my gear, so I'm not wasting DPS. Again, I don't want to switch, then move. I want to be doing 2 actions at the same time here. So if I can be moving and doing the switch at the same time, that's combining 2 actions at the same time. I can get more DPS out faster that way. And then you also see another thing that I don't really talk about a whole lot in this guy, because it's a little bit more intricate than what I want to get into in an introduction to bossing, but a little bit of understanding how to position. And DKs, if you stand too far to the west, when you're killing Prime, if you don't kill Prime fast enough, there's a chance that when Supreme spawns, he can get onto you, so you want to stand far to the east. Again, this is positioning, but you see that I'm trying to maximize my DPS while trying to kill Prime, or trying to max my DPS while doing all these other things, positioning, changing gear, prayers, whatever. But you also see while I'm doing this that the other stuff that I've talked about prior parts of this guide, things like health management, prayer management, all of that, are things that I'm managing as well. I have to make sure that all of these are in line, or else I will die. It all builds on itself. That's why I'm talking about DK's last, is because you have to understand how to manage your prayer, how to manage your health, knowing when to eat, knowing when you can take a hit, knowing when you can tank, all this stuff. You have to understand how to do that and maximize your DPS to the same time before you can add on another layer, which is switching your gear. Switching your gear when you're trying to first understand, like, can I tank this? Do I need to drink a prayer potion here? I need to eat here. What else can I drink? Like, before you can understand all of that, and then you had switching onto that, you have to understand the fundamentals. All of these are fundamentals, and then you can build upon them. I'm not going to bore you guys too much with this clip, but you see, I'm trying to switch stuff as fast as possible. A tip here, which I do a very bad job of doing this because this is like my second trip to DKs. I don't really do DKs all that often. But a tip is to try to keep all of your gear in the same spot. Don't move your gear around. DKs is a little bit different because you're doing your tri-breeding, so you have 3 different gear slots, so they all kind of move around. But you want to keep a general close proximity of them at the same time. That way it's easier for you to muscle memory to remember, okay, my mage gear is in this area, or like my range gear is in this area, like my gear is always in this area. It's very easy. When I need a gear swap, I know exactly what spot in my inventory to go to, do the switch as fast as possible, and get back to DPSing. A tip: keep all your gear in the same spot. It's going to make it a lot easier for you to find what you need to switch to. So in this video, we covered a few topics. We covered a lot about prayer management and health management, but more specifically in that, we talked about like how to manage your food, knowing when you need to eat, knowing how to know if you can tank it or not, knowing when you need to combo something, knowing how to do 2 actions instead of just 1 action, how to maximize your time. Then we also talked about like switching and walking bosses to minimize damage taken, as well as maximize DPS by making sure we don't have too much downtime from switching our gear. We also touched a little bit on positioning, but not that much. That would be more of like an intermediate guide that I would talk about. But we covered a lot of fundamentals here. If something didn't make sense to you, then please just go back in the video, look it through, watch it through, join our CC, ask us a question about PVM. There's a lot of us in there who do PVM a lot, and there's a lot of people in there who are willing to teach you as well. So if you have questions, just join that or rewatch the video from that segment on in the timestamp. And I hope you guys really did enjoy the video. If you did, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe if you want more content from the channel, as well as comment down below for whatever reason. Hope for a great morning, afternoon, evening, night, whatever time of day it is where you are. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.